Well, we're gonna continue talking about the second part of the dural folds and sinus. In the past video, we talked about the dural folds. Now, to understand the sinuses, the venous sinus, we need to understand they are not veins, okay? Because they don't have this, they don't have these muscular layers, this part, okay? They are part of the folds of the dura. If we have dura here, these folds of dura here, another folds of dura, okay? They make this shape. Regularly, the sinus have the prismatic triangular shape, okay? But some of them are irregularly cylindric. They are located in the cranial walls, and they usually make sulcus, okay? Like the transverse sinus make this sulcus in the occipital bone. Although sagittal or superior sagittal sinus make all these sulcus all over around the parietal, frontal, and occipital bones. Okay. You can see here what the function of the sinus, called the blood from the brain, the meninges, the orbit, and the internal ear, and the diploid. They connected to the emissary veins, okay, and maintain the internal and external venous pressure. It's important because we remember they don't have these muscular walls. If we cut the sinus, they gonna keep open, okay? They are not elastic at all, no contractile, no elastic. And if you can see here, if we see, we're gonna see it later, the sinus inside, they have like they have these trabecles, okay, inside, very irregular shape inside of the lumen of the sinus. We're gonna see it now more later. Exists 21 sinus, 5 of them they are impar and in the middle line, and the other they are pair and they are laterally, okay? We're gonna divide them in antero-inferior and posterior-superior group. Okay, we will continue talking about the posterior-superior group. All the sinus have a common characteristic, and this characteristic is all of them finish anterior to the internal occipital protuberance, okay? In the aerophilus, torcular aerophilus, okay? All of them finish here. There are 7 of them. 3 of them are impaired, and they occupy the falx cerebri. We have here superior sagittal sinus, inferior sagittal sinus, and Senus Rectus. Okay, these 3 are impaired, and they are all over around the falx cerebri. And the other 4, they are impaired, and they are the marginal sinus and the lateral sinus. Okay, we're gonna start talking about the sagittal superior sinus. As you can see here, okay, you see this sinus start in the middle line and occupied all over the extension of the convex area of the falx cerebri. Okay, originate superior to the frontal crest. We're gonna have here the frontal crest originate here and extend all over to the confluence of the sinus, aerophilus, torcular aerophilus. Okay, so to this sinus, we're gonna see on all this trajectory, this is gonna make a sulcus in the parietal bone. If you take the parietal bone in the intracranial surface, we're gonna see all these very marked sulcus, and these sulcus extend from the frontal bone, parietal bone, and the occipital bone. Okay, and you see here the caliber, the diameter of the sinus is smaller here anteriorly, but it's gonna get bigger until the end. Okay, until the end, the caliber is something like 1 centimeter. If we see the sinus, if we cut here, we're gonna see this sinus have a prismatic triangular shape. We're gonna have superior surface and two lateral surface. Okay, two lateral surface. If we see inside the sinus is not regular, so it's gonna have the trabecles we talked in the beginning. We're gonna check now the sinus and see what we're talking about. You see here the superior sagittal sinus all over, and look here. Look here, we cut the superior sagittal sinus, and you see, okay. This is the arachnoid belly. This is the passioning granulation. Okay. Okay, and you see here again. This is the false cerebri, and you see the superior sagittal sinus finish here. Okay. So the superior sagittal sinus receive the vein of the foramen secum, receive also the cerebral superior veins, anastomotic superior vein. These extend all over the superior sagittal sinus and the cavernous sinus. Okay, the anastomotic inferior vein also, that also join to the transverse sinus. Okay, one to the cavernous sinus, the superior one, and the inferior anastomotic one to the transverse sinus. Also receive the meningeal veins, medial meningeal veins, and diploid veins also, okay? And some emissary veins, some parietal emissary veins. These going through the parietal foramens and connect the two circulation, the two drainage, okay? Intra and extracranial. So now we're going to talk about the Senus Rectus. You can see here the Senus Rectus, it's extend all over the base of the falx cerebri. The Senus Rectus receive in its anterior part. It receive in its anterior part the cerebellosa superior vein. Also receive the cerebral magna vein, or the deep cerebral veins, and also the superior sagittal So now we're going to talk about the Senus Rectus. As you can see here, the Senus Rectus extends all over the base of the falx cerebri, and if we cut in a coronal shape, coronal cut, we're going to see it's have a isosceles triangle shape. It's going to receive in its anterior part the deep cerebral veins, or the cerebral magna vein, also the superior cerebellosas vein, and the inferior sagittal sinus. Okay, you can see here. You see here inferior sagittal sinus finishing here, and you see there all go to the torcula. Okay, Aerophilos torcula. So, and now we have here the sagittal inferior sinus. You see it's occupied the half inferior of all over the falx cerebri. It's very small, and the same as the superior sagittal sinus, its caliber, the diameter is gonna grow from anterior to posterior. It's gonna receive the veins of the falx cerebri, and as I said before, it's gonna finish here in the Senus Rectus. We're gonna have also these three sinus are impairs, okay? And the pairs one, we're gonna have the marginal sinus. They are very small sinus, very narrow sinus, and they are located in the jugular foramen, and they communicate with the terminal part of the sigmoid sinus. You can see here the marginal sinus. So from this point they go from go posterior and medially, and they finish in the torcula or the confluence of the sinus. Okay, they separate. Usually, they separate in two trunks, or also in one common trunk. Okay, in the occipital sinus. So now we're gonna talk about the transverse sinus or lateral sinus. You see here, these sinus have their origin in the confluence of the sinus, okay, and they extend all over laterally and then inferiorly, okay, until they go to the jugular foramen, and they continue with the jugular internal vein. The caliber of this sinus from the confluence of the sinus gonna get bigger from here to the bulb of the jugular vein. The caliber gonna get bigger. So usually the right lateral sinus, the caliber of the right lateral sinus is bigger than the left one. We're gonna see more of a picture here of the sinus. Okay, you can see here the transverse sinus. So you see this trajectory of this sinus is very sinuous. You see, it's not straight one. So you can, and you're gonna see this trajectory of the transverse sinus is gonna allow us to identify the transverse sinus and the sigmoid sinus. Okay, so we can have we're gonna have a mastoid segment or descending segment and the jugular segment. So if we talk just now of the transverse sinus, it's go through the confluence of the sinus to the posterior part or the superior border of the petrous part of the temporal bone. Okay, so and then become the sigmoid sinus, and the sigmoid sinus we're gonna have this mastoid or descending segment, and also wanna have this jugular segment. Okay, this jugular segment is when this sinus get to the inferior part of the base of the petrous part of the occipital of the temporal bone. So the sinus get straight and go superior, anterior, and medially to the jugular segment of this sulcus. Important. The lateral sinus gonna receive in the origin the superior sagittal sinus, the Senus Rectus, and the marginal sinus. In the transverse segment, so here in the transverse segment, gonna receive the cerebral posterior vein and the inferior, okay, and also gonna receive the posterior cerebellosus vein. In the origin of the mastoid segment, is gonna receive the petrous superior vein, superior sinus, and in the mastoid segment, it's gonna receive the vein of the aqueduct and the vestibule also, and also gonna receive a very big vein. This is the emissary mastoid vein. So, and in the end of the posterosuperior group, we need to talk about the confluence of the sinus of torcula, Aerophilus torcula. This is the point of join of all the sinus, posterior group, the superior sagittal sinus, Senus Rectus, marginal sinus. This confluence of the sinus is anterior to the internal occipital protuberance. Okay, so the shape in the sinus get in the confluence is variable. It's a very different shape and different way. Sometimes they get in the common reservoir, or sometimes the superior sagittal sinus and the Senus Rectus they divide in two lateral branches. Okay, and they continuously with the sinus transversus. So it's gonna be something like here, here, and this here, okay, without make this confluence, okay. But sometimes also the superoscipital sinus it's open, and open in the transverse sinus. So we can say the asymmetry of the confluence of the sinus is gonna be in relation of the develop of the hemisphere.